now a freelancer. I've been freelancing for the last 4 years. My start into coding was actually data science. So I have a master's degree in data science, but I realized after some time working in data that I was actually more interested in building real products. Like I'd like to build my own apps. I like to build my own websites, all of that. And with data, you're always reliant on, whatever data you actually have coming in. So I started learning web dev and then started my own agency, which is sort of, or was originally supposed to do data science and web dev. But then I just got more and more projects in the web dev realm. And I just, by now I'm basically just doing web dev and very, very little data science.
Interesting that you say that, because some people who are learning to code, they're like, where do I go? Do I do data science? Do I do this? And I think one thing that you pointed out here is that you should probably do the thing that interests you and keeps you excited doing it. Can you talk a little bit about the transition going from data science to like web dev and building things? How was it like for you?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is incredibly valuable. At least for me, that was the case, because I think that when you learn to code, things are incredibly difficult, right? Just learning how to code is just a lot, right? You have to learn so much. And if you do it if you learn something just because you think there's going to be a lot of money at the end of it, it's very hard in all those days to keep up the motivation. So for me, I didn't really think about the transitionings. Like I said, I was basically just the first thing I wanted to do was build like a fantasy football manager on the side. That was my first web dev project, and I never finished it because I couldn't get it done, but at least it kept me going more and more. And then I learned all the things that I needed to do that and so on. And then it really just, when I started freelancing, it just happened to be that there was more demand for building customized websites. And I have to also be honest, like when I started freelancing, I think I wasn't necessarily at the level I should have been at to start those projects, but you just sort of grow with the tasks as well. It's kind of stressful, but you will get there eventually.
Yeah, it's a lot of folks ask me about freelancing. Should I go into freelancing as I'm learning to code? And it's such a tough question to answer for me, because I feel like freelancing, it's not just about coding or building projects. There's that aspect of finding clients, client management, what happens if they don't want to pay you? There's like so many different moving parts. So I think it's a very difficult thing. So I always tell people, if you get some work experience first and then decide if freelancing is for you. But at the same time, that would be a little bit dishonest answer for me, because when I was learning to code, I played a little game because I wasn't sure if I was going to get hired as a developer, because I started learning to code at age of 36. And the way I got started into coding is I used to have my own business. I used to teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I realized I loved spending more time on my WordPress website and like building it and learning about WordPress, that I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I played a little game with myself. It's like, what's going to happen first? Am I going to get WordPress clients because I wanted to build like small business websites for folks local in my area where I lived? Or am I, going to get a job as a developer? And so I kind of started doing those in parallel. So, and they both led to that same goal of learning web development. And I did get few projects with WordPress, but then eventually when I got hired, I was like, oh, let me go this route just so I could get some work experience, because those are two different things. And I guess like my follow-up question to that would be, how do you look at like freelancing versus a job, and what like thoughts you would, or considerations you would give people? Because I don't think it's like pushing people to do one or the other, but at least like telling people like, hey, these are some of the things to expect, and, think about it.
For sure. I mean, it's a really good question, because I think there are quite big differences. And I do agree with you that I think having first some experience as an employee, and for me, it was only data science, but I was still working as a developer, and I know the general workflow, and you at least know like, okay, you should at least have like a prod environment, a dev environment, like, some general paradigms or concepts that will help you as well, that you won't necessarily learn in, I don't know, your Udemy courses when you're just starting out as a developer. So I think it helps a lot to have at least some experience beforehand, and also have seen like how you should structure bigger web projects and so on, so that you can actually set it up yourself properly. But then on the, like, I think this, like, skill wise, one big difference is for sure that when you're freelancing, at least for me, right, that's my experience, very often you will have to set up projects from scratch. So you have to be somebody that can start from nothing and produce something in a short amount of time. Well, I think as an employee, especially for larger companies, it's way more important, that you just follow the best code practices, that everything is exactly right, structured and so on. While with freelancing, you're very often going to work with non-technical people that just want to see the website develop in a certain time frame, and you often have trade-offs. And maybe sometimes you're not going to write the best code, but you need to have the code that gets it done. And that's the next thing where when you're an employee, and especially not if you're a manager or something, you often have somebody above you that can sort of protect you, or like you can go to somebody and say like, hey, I can't make this work. When you're freelancing, the only person you can talk to is the client, and the client doesn't want to hear that you can't get something to work. So there's a bit more pressure that you just have to get it done. I think that's kind of the difference. As an employee, you always have a little bit of protection from somebody that, either can fix it for you or can tell somebody else like, oh, this is just not possible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing of meeting the deadline, and it's funny how if you're a developer versus a freelancer, the way you think differently and the way clients look at what you do differently. As a developer, a lot of times you're like, oh, like this feature that I'm working on, like how do I make it more efficient? How I do this? Where at the end of the day, the client just wants, where the hell is my product? Where's my website? And they just care about you delivering. And so sometimes I think about, you could be a great developer, but that might not translate into a good freelancer, because as a freelancer, what you're actually getting paid to do is solve business needs that clients have. And what I was actually going to follow up with, because I know there's so much AI hype and so many cool tools that are being developed, that I feel like a lot of developers, they're like, hey, it's going to take all of our jobs, which I think it's a tool. I don't think it's going to get to that point. At least, who knows the future? Maybe we'll have cyberpunk dystopia, who knows? But with these tools, I feel like if you're like a solopreneur or a developer, you have all these things that you could leverage to help your clients, kind of get stuff done. Do you have any opinions on kind of like the state of AI and your thoughts on it?